What's up, everybody? Kevin Allen here, aka the Fantasy Football Geek from DFSArmy.com. I'm back with another 2018 Fantasy Football Rankings video. So basically what you're looking at here are my 2018 quarterback rankings, and I've already gone through wide receiver, tight end, running back positions, and now we get to the all-important quarterback position. Now, if you know me, you know that my number one thing in standard leagues, any kind of 12-team single quarterback league, is generally to wait on drafting the quarterback position. I never take one early. I'd rather have a stud running back or a stud wide receiver. That is the correct approach to fantasy football. We look at positional scarcity, and one of the things that you'll note at the end of each season is, a lot of the middling quarterbacks end up with about the same score, within 10 or 20 points of one another. So it's not worth taking Russell Wilson for me, in the second round, when I can get, someone like Phillip Rivers in the 8th round or 9th round and get, 20 total points less. If I drop from a second round running back to an 8th round running back, I'm probably talking about 100 points or more or less. So that's really one of the keys to the approach in fantasy football, and that's pretty well known at this point if you look at the overall ADPs. And I'll just go through this real quick again. The first number here is my personal ranking for the player. These will change as the offseason progresses and we get more data from training camp and whatnot. It is July 12th as I'm doing this video, so what you see on screen here today will probably not be what you see at the end, but since I'm doing a ton of best ball leagues right now, this is what I'm using. This is the information that we have right now, and this is what I'm going with. So first number is my personal ranking for the player against his position group. Number one overall quarterback. Next number is the ADP number for that player in his position group. So basically this tells us what the market, where the market sees this player. Third number is the difference. So I take the difference between my rank and the current ADP, and that's where you get a little bit of some of the players I like a little bit more than the field and some of the ones I like a little bit less than the field, right? And then you have their overall ADP, and this is really important because it also gives you an idea of kind of tiers and where to draft, so where certain players are going. You could see that even Aaron Rodgers, who is the number one overall pick, he is not going until the end or the beginning of the third round. Watson, towards the end of the third round, beginning of the fourth round, and that's when you have a little run on some of these higher end stud quarterbacks. And then you see the middling tier of quarterbacks here going, somewhere between the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. Usually what ends up happening in drafts is you'll fill in a couple of running backs, maybe 2 wide receivers, and a tight end, and then you're looking at the quarterback position. So, at that point it's the 6th round. You might either be looking at some crappy or some WR3 type situation or some backup running back, or, you want to grab, Cam Newton, who's still sitting there, and you're like, I'm going to take him. All right, so real quick, running through the rankings. I was kind of surprised that Watson is as high as he is in the ADP numbers, but I agree with it. I think Deshaun Watson's the most exciting, highest upside quarterback we have this season. He looked incredible last year. He can do it in the pocket. He can do damage with his legs. The one risk here is the RG3 effect. We saw RG3 have this incredible first season. Watson only gave us really 6 or 7 games of action to judge him by, but he looked incredible in all 6 or 7 of those games. RG3 looked great in his first season, and then he came back and was terrible. So, there's always that risk that, this is not an established stud. Which is why old reliable Aaron Rodgers is being ranked ahead of him. But if we see the same Deshaun Watson we saw for those 7 games last year, look out. He will be a difference maker and a league winner for some people. So, he's one of those quarterbacks that I don't even mind stretching for, particularly in shallow leagues like 10-team leagues. You can really actually not worry too much about positional scarcity in a 10-team league because there's so few teams. You really have a ton of studs. at all positions to choose from in those type of leagues. Russell Wilson just does it with his legs and with his arm. He's been relatively consistent. I'm probably not taking him where he's going at 49, even though I like him ahead of Tom Brady. I'm just not going to grab him at that draft position. I'm not going to take a quarterback there. I'll never end up with Wilson or Tom Brady on any of my teams just because of where they're going, and I don't really see either player as that much better than some of the ones I can get a lot later. I like Cam Newton. He's got massive ceiling every single game. He's the goal line option on his team, but he rarely puts up big passing numbers, so that kind of levels it out. He's not a super stud by any stretch. Love Garoppolo this year. He's a guy I'll have on a lot of my teams because I'll take him ahead of some guys that are kind of going ahead of him. So I'll just generally wait. And if you can get Garoppolo in the 7th round, I really like him there. I don't think his team is good enough to shut teams down defensively. I like situations where players' offenses are good, but the defense is bad. Those are the ideal situations for quarterbacks because they continue to throw. If you think about Alex Smith and what he's been for the last few years, I want to use that as an example. Chiefs, very conservative offense, running back heavy, defense focused, so they didn't have to throw that much. And their pass catchers and quarterback really suffer in those situations. We don't want those kind of teams. We want teams that have to throw a lot. Well, that's part of what I like about Watson. I mean, Houston isn't exactly some shutdown defense. They're fine, but, they're getting scored on. So those games turn into shootouts because when you have a quality offense and your defense ain't that good, you get into a shootout. San Francisco, similar situation. Their defense isn't great. Their offense is fantastic. So hopefully Garoppolo's either playing from behind or, in shootouts in a lot of these games. That's a negative for Kirk Cousins with Minnesota. It's quite the opposite. Minnesota has a wonderful defense. They keep their team in games, and they're not going to lean on their quarterback as hard. That doesn't mean Cousins isn't going to have a great season. He should, because he's really good, and those weapons on his team are fantastic. But I don't think it's going to be a situation where Cousins is playing from behind a lot. I think they'll be protecting a lead. So, he'll have those good games, but maybe not the spectacular games. Breeze, I like a lot less than the field. Saints have gone to a run-focused offense. They did it last year. Really severely limited the ceiling of Drew Brees. I can't recall how many games over 20 fantasy points he had, but it wasn't a lot. And I don't think there was a single game that even came close to 30 fantasy points last season. Rivers, I like more than the field. Quite a bit more. Very consistent quarterback. Don't have a running back who's going to get in the end zone with consistency, which means he's going to be throwing a lot. Throwing for tutties, that's what we want. Once you get past Rivers, you kind of move to an inconsistent list of quarterbacks. Stafford, better at home than on the road. Goff, has to deal with girly studliness, really sucking up a lot of the scoring for his team, but I do like Goff. Mariota, I think, is going to bounce back this season with a new coaching staff. Big Ben, terrible on the road. Luck hasn't played in years. Complete rust. I don't want anything to do with him this season. So, in 2 QB leagues, you're probably going to need one of these lower-end guys. When I look at the bottom of the list, I don't mind certain names that might make you cringe. Alex Smith, I don't mind Alex Smith this year. You might think he's super conservative, but again, he's the opposite. He's on the Redskins. They're going to be playing from behind. They're not a great team, and it's going to force Smith to throw. And when he's been forced to throw, he's done really well. I think Eli Manning could do a little bit better this year with... Actually, I think the running game is going to help him, and having OBJ back, I think, for the price, he's a fine risk. Tyrod Taylor should do fine with Cleveland. Does some scoring with his legs. And I kind of like Pat Mahomes a little bit as a young quarterback with a lot of upside. And again, a running quarterback. Maybe he's this year's Deshaun Watson breakout. But for a late pick, he's worth a bench stash. All right, that's it for my quarterback rankings for today. Remember, these can change as the offseason progresses, but for now, this is where I'm at. I want to encourage everybody to go to dfsarmy.com. Sign up as a VIP member. We have a Slack group where you can ask me specific questions about your fantasy draft. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. DFS Army is all things daily fantasy sports. So we've got optimization tools. We've got ownership projections. We've got custom projections. We've got members taking down GPPs, tournaments every single week. It's ridiculous. Last season, our members had over $1 million in just big wins on DraftKings and FanDuel, and we expect more of that this year with extra tools and more great stuff. So go to dfsarmy.com, sign up as a VIP member. You can ask me questions. That's the cool thing about DFS Army. We have a Slack group. All of our coaches, all of our pros, everybody's accessible. We answer questions. We talk to the members. We break down notes. It's awesome. All right, so this is it for my season-long rankings. And be sure to check back on this sheet. If you're a DFS Army VIP member, click back on the sheet as the offseason progresses to see how these change over the course of the offseason.